Can a parent love you only for what you give them? I found out the answer the night I lost my job, and my family's silence hit harder than anything else. I was 34 when the phone call came. Tuesday evening, 7:45. I was heating up leftover Chinese food in my studio apartment when my supervisor's voice cracked through the speaker. "Budget cuts," she said. "Nothing personal, Rachel. You know how much we value you." 8 years at the nonprofit. 8 years of 60-hour weeks, of skipping vacations to cover for understaffed programs, of believing that dedication would somehow shield me from the inevitable. The line went dead, and I sat there staring at my phone, wondering who to call. First stop, my parents, of course. They'd been so proud when I got the job, bragging to neighbors about their daughter who helped homeless families find housing. They'd understand. They'd offer comfort, maybe even invite me over for dinner while I figured out my next move. But when I called, Mom's voice went flat the moment I said the words. "Oh," she said. A pause. "Well, I'm sure you'll figure something out." "No, I'm sorry." "No, how are you holding it together?" Just the sound of her already moving on to the next thing, the next person who might need her attention. What happened next shocked even me because it revealed a truth I'd spent 34 years pretending didn't exist. Growing up in Rochester, I was the child who made everything easier. While my older sister Beth bounced between rehab centers and my younger brother Danny struggled through community college, I was the one who remembered birthdays, who organized holiday dinners, who quietly wired money when Dad's plumbing business hit rough patches. I was 7 when I first understood my role. Mom was crying in the kitchen, bills spread across the table like fallen leaves. Dad was working late again, trying to drum up enough business to keep us afloat. Beth was 16 and sneaking out through her bedroom window. Danny was 4 and wouldn't stop asking for juice dot. I made him a peanut butter sandwich, cut the crust off the way he liked, turned on cartoons, and sat with him until he fell asleep on the couch. When Mom found us there, she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You're my angel," she whispered. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I carried those words like a talisman. Through high school, when I chose practical classes over art electives because the family needed someone who could handle finances. Through college, when I picked social work because it seemed like the responsible choice, the helping choice. Through my 20s, when I sent money home instead of traveling, when I chose apartments based on proximity to family rather than dreams, I thought I was being loved for who I was. I didn't realize I was being loved for what I provided. The signs were always there. The way conversations pivoted to family crises whenever I mentioned my own struggles. The way my achievements became footnotes in stories about Beth's latest setback or Danny's newest attempt at finding himself. The way my phone only rang when someone needed something, but I told myself it was just family. That this was what love looked like when you were the strong one, the reliable one, the one who could handle anything. I was wrong. 3 weeks after losing my job, I got a call from a lawyer in Buffalo. My great-aunt Margaret had died, and somehow, inexplicably, she'd left me everything. We'd barely spoken in years, but she'd been watching from a distance. And she'd seen something in our family dynamic that I'd miss. The inheritance wasn't. Enormous ... $200,000 and a small house upstate. But it was enough to change everything. Enough to pay off my student loans. Enough to take time figuring out what came next. Enough to stop being the family's emergency fund. Lawyer handed me a sealed envelope along with the paperwork. Inside, in Margaret's careful handwriting, "Rachel, I watched your family take from you for years. They love what you provide, not who you are. Don't tell them about this money until you see who they really are when they can't use you anymore. You deserve to be loved for yourself, not for what you can fix." I drove home in a daze, those words echoing in my mind. That evening, I didn't call my parents to share the news. For the first time in my adult life, I kept something important to myself. The silence felt strange, almost guilty, but also liberating. 2 weeks later, Mom called. Not to check how I was doing with unemployment, but to deliver news with forced casualness. Your father needs surgery, she said. Nothing serious, but you know how these things go. The insurance won't cover everything, and with the business slow, she trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. I'd always been the one they turned to when money got tight. The responsible daughter with a steady job and no dependents. How much? I asked, though I knew the answer would be devastating. 15,000, maybe 20, but we'll manage somehow. We always do. The manipulation was subtle but unmistakable. They'd manage somehow, but they shouldn't have to. I was family. I was supposed to step up. I can't help this time, I said. Quietly, I'm still looking for work. The silence stretched between us like a wound. What do you mean you can't help? Mom's voice sharpened. You've always been so good with money. You must have savings. I have savings, but I need them for my own expenses right now. Your own expenses? She said it like the words tasted bitter. Rachel, this is your father's health we're talking about. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of guilt settling on my shoulders. But underneath it, something else was stirring. A quiet anger at the assumption that my financial security existed for their peace of mind. I know it's hard, I said, but I can't be the solution to this problem. When she hung up, she didn't say goodbye. They didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of silence from the family I'd spent my entire life supporting. No calls to check on my job search. No messages asking how I was holding up. Just radio silence, as if I'd ceased to exist the moment I became unavailable as a financial resource. During those weeks, I started paying attention to patterns I'd ignored for years. I scrolled through my phone records, noting when they called and what they needed. I reviewed my bank statements, adding up the money I'd sent home over the years. Thousands of dollars. Tens of thousands, maybe. I've been their insurance policy, their safety net, their solution to every crisis. And when I was no longer available in that capacity, I simply wasn't. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the quiet I thought I wanted, and realized I'd been mourning the wrong thing. I wasn't grieving the loss of my job. I was grieving the loss of an illusion. The belief that I was loved for who I was, not for what I could provide. Danny called on a Thursday evening. I almost didn't answer. Hey, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Mom wanted me to call. Of course she did. Send Danny, the baby of the family, to soften me up. How are you doing? I asked, though I could guess why he was calling. I'm okay. Listen, about Dad's surgery. We found another way to pay for it, but things are really tight. And I was wondering, he needed money for rent. $500 to keep his apartment while he looked for better work. It was always something. Always an emergency that required my intervention. I can't help right now, I said. Come on, Rachel. It's just $500. You know I'm good for it. I did know. Danny had always paid me back eventually. But I also knew that this cycle would never end. There would always be another emergency, another crisis, another reason why I needed to solve someone else's problems. I'm sorry, I said. I really can't. The disappointment in his voice cut through me like a blade. But I didn't change my mind. They staged an intervention. That's what it felt like when I walked into Mom's kitchen on a Saturday afternoon, thinking I'd been invited for coffee, only to find the whole family waiting. Mom, Dad, Beth, and Danny, all arranged around the kitchen table like a tribunal. The air was thick with unspoken accusations. We need to talk, Mom said, her voice tight with control. I sat down slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. We're worried about you, Dad said. This isn't like you, Rachel. You've always been there for family. I'm unemployed, I said. I'm trying to figure out my own life right now. But you're acting like we're strangers, Beth said. She'd been clean for 6 months, and there was a sharpness to her that hadn't been there during her using years. You won't help Dad with his surgery. You won't help Danny with rent. What's going on? I looked around the table at these people who'd shaped my entire identity. The family I prioritized above everything else. The people I thought loved me unconditionally. I'm tired, I said simply. Tired of what? Mom asked. Tired of being the family emergency fund. Tired of being valued for what I can provide instead of who I am. The silence that followed was deafening. That's not fair, Dad said. We love you. We've always loved you. When? I asked. When do you love me? When I'm solving problems? When I'm sending money? When I'm making everyone else's life easier? You're being dramatic, Mom said, but her voice wavered. Am I? When's the last time you called just to see how I was? Doing? When's the last time you asked about my dreams, my goals, my feelings about anything that didn't relate to how I could help someone else? They looked at each other, and I saw the answer in their silence. Beth leaned forward. We're family. Family helps each other. Family also loves each other unconditionally, I said. But your love seems to come with a price tag. I stood up, my legs shaking. I need some time to think. About what? Mom asked. About whether I want to keep paying it. I left them sitting there, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. I didn't make a big announcement. I didn't write a letter or send a text explaining my decision. I simply stopped. Stopped answering calls that came with requests. Stopped volunteering solutions to problems that weren't mine to solve. Stopped being available as the family's designated fixer. I used part of the inheritance to move to a small town in the Adirondacks, 2 hours from Rochester. I rented a cabin by a lake, surrounded by the kind of quiet I'd never experienced living in the city. For the first time in my adult life, I woke up without anxiety about who might need something from me that day. The house was small but perfect. 1 bedroom, a kitchen that looked out over the water, a living room with a fireplace that worked. I set up a home office and started freelance grant writing for small nonprofits. The work was meaningful, but it was mine. My schedule, my clients, my decisions. I adopted a dog from the local shelter. A golden retriever mix named Luna, who'd been returned 3 times because she was too needy. We understood each other perfectly. For 3 months, I lived in blissful isolation. I hiked mountain trails, read books I'd been meaning to get to for years, and learned to cook meals for one without feeling guilty about it. I discovered that I actually enjoyed my own company, that I had thoughts and opinions and dreams that existed independently of my family's needs. But of course, they found me. The first sign was a car I didn't recognize parked at the end of my driveway. Then flowers delivered to my door with a card that read, "We miss you. Love, Mom." I threw the flowers away. Then came the emails. Long, rambling messages from Beth about family unity and forgiveness. Texts from Danny about how much they all miss me. Voice messages from Dad about blood being thicker than water. But it was. Mom's letter that broke through my defenses. "Rachel, I don't understand what's happened to you. You've always been our rock, our anchor. Without you, everything feels like it's falling apart. Beth is struggling again. Danny lost his job. Your father's health is declining. We need you. We've always needed you. Isn't that love? Isn't that what family means?" I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face, because part of me, the part that had been trained from childhood to fix everyone else's problems, wanted to pack up and drive home. Wanted to resume my role as the family's savior. But I'd learned something in those months of quiet. I'd learned the difference between being needed and being loved. And I'd learned that I deserved better than conditional affection. I wrote back. 1 sentence. Being needed isn't the same as being loved. I never sent it. When gentle manipulation didn't work, they escalated. Mom showed up at my door on a Tuesday morning, unannounced and furious. "This is ridiculous," she said, pushing past me into the cabin. "You're living in the middle of nowhere, hiding from your family like we're criminals." "I'm not hiding," I said calmly. I'm living my life. This isn't living. This is selfishness. She gestured around the cabin with disdain. You have everything you need, and we're struggling. Beth's back in rehab. Danny's about to lose his apartment. Your father, ... Stop, I said. Stop what? Telling you the truth. Your family needs you, and you're playing house in the woods like some kind of hermit. I looked at this woman who'd raised me, who taught me that my worth was measured in how much I could sacrifice for others. And I realized that she genuinely couldn't understand why I'd chosen myself over them. I'm not responsible for Beth's addiction, I said quietly. I'm not responsible for Danny's employment. I'm not responsible for Dad's health or your financial security. You're our daughter, she said, her voice breaking. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It means I love you, I said, but it doesn't mean I owe you my life. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact moment she realized. She couldn't control me anymore. Fine, she said, but don't expect us to be here when you finally come to your senses. She left, and I stood in my kitchen shaking, but not from fear. From relief. They tried everything. Guilt trips delivered through mutual friends. Holiday invitations with emotional manipulation attached. Even a fake emergency call about Dad being in the hospital, which I discovered was a lie when I called to check. But it was the night they showed up drunk at my door, all of them, demanding I stop being selfish and come home, that I knew I needed legal protection. I filed for a restraining order the next morning. The paperwork was simple, clinical. A request for legal distance from people who couldn't respect emotional boundaries. The hearing was surreal. Sitting across from my family in a courtroom, explaining to a judge why I needed protection from the people who'd raised me. Mom cried. Dad looked bewildered. Beth and Danny sat in stunned silence. Your Honor, I said when asked to explain my request, I love my family, but they've made it clear that their love for me is conditional on my availability to solve their problems. When I stepped back from that road, they began harassing me. I just want to live my life in peace. The judge granted the order. 90 days of legally mandated distance. As we left the courthouse, Mom stopped me in the parking lot. I hope you're happy, she said. You've destroyed our family. I didn't destroy anything, I said. I just stopped holding it together. That was the last time I spoke to any of them. The restraining order expired after 90 days. I didn't renew it. I didn't need to. The message had been received, and the silence that followed was different from the punitive silence they'd used to manipulate me before. This silence was acceptance. They'd finally understood that I wasn't coming back, that I wouldn't resume my role as their financial and emotional safety net. And faced with that reality, they'd chosen to move on without me. I'd expected to feel sad about it. Instead, I felt something I'd never experienced before, complete freedom. I started a garden that spring. Vegetables and flowers planted in neat rows behind the cabin. I joined a hiking group and made friends who knew me as Rachel, the grant writer, not Rachel, the family problem solver. I dated a man named Tom, who was kind and stable and never asked me to be anything other than myself. On my 36th birthday, I had a party. 7 friends from town, homemade cake, and a bonfire by the lake. We told stories and laughed until our sides hurt. And when someone asked about my family, I said simply, we're not in touch anymore. No one pressed for details. No one made me feel guilty for choosing happiness over obligation. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I sat by the dying fire and thought about the girl I'd been. The child who made peanut butter sandwiches and organized holiday dinners and believed that love was earned through sacrifice. I mourned her, the girl, who'd given everything and asked for nothing in return. But I also celebrated the woman she'd become. The woman who'd learned that love without conditions isn't love at all. 2 years later, I got a card in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Best Rachel, I'd been clean for 8 months. I'm in therapy, and I've been talking about our family. about how we used you. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I understand now. I hope you're happy. I hope you're free. Love, Beth. I cry when I read it. Not from sadness, but from a kind of completion. Someone in my family had finally seen what I've been trying to show them all along. I wrote back. A brief note wishing her well in her recovery, thanking her for the apology, and letting her know that I was indeed happy and free. I never heard from the others. And that was okay. I'd learned that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation, that healing doesn't require the people who hurt you to acknowledge their mistakes. I'd learned that some doors, once closed, are meant to stay that way. Now, at 38, I have a life that's entirely my own. I run a successful consulting business from my cabin. I have friends who value me for who I am, not for what I can provide. I have a garden that blooms every spring, a dog who loves me unconditionally, and a partner who's never asked me to be anything other than myself. I wake up every morning to the sound of laps lapping against the shore, and I remember what it felt like to believe that love came with a price tag. I remember the weight of being everything to everyone, and the lightness that came with choosing myself instead. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed. If I'd kept being the family's emergency fund, the designated fixer, the one who held everything together, I probably would have burned out completely, lost myself entirely in the needs of others. Instead, I found something I never had before: peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing your worth isn't measured in what you can provide for others. The kind of peace that comes from being loved for who you are, not for what you can fix. The kind of peace that's worth any price. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you're the one your family turns to when everything falls apart, if you're tired of being valued for what you provide instead of who you are, I want you to know that you deserve more. You deserve to be loved unconditionally. You deserve to choose yourself. It's not easy. It's not pretty. But it's worth it. And you're worth it. Trust me on that. You're worth it.